then Johnny Rinpoche is what was you can say it. Send the Tonglen comes. I don't think that send that $2 and then I'm going to Johnny. I've been thought of the crew. I don't know, and then send that sugar and then they got basic.
Now, to continue with the text of Karma Chakmas, the union of Mahmudra and Dzogchen, Karma Chakma goes on to say, make use of your mind by meditating on emptiness and compassion. Presently, it is rather more the case that our mind is constantly busy with thinking of this and that and all sorts of things. However, what we should train ourselves in is what Karma Chakma advises, the meditation on emptiness and on compassion. So this would be what we should employ that mind of ours for.
And don't need something. Don't need something. Don't need to do the top. And then, I think I'm on some. And then come to go up. Long at them, don't embark your daughter. Many Shiné. Young people, you're never only move the Johnny Shiné come. That's simply a category.
So as Karma Chakma advises, we should, among other things, meditate on emptiness. Such meditation includes the practices of Shamatha or Shiné and Vipashyana or Lakthong. If, for instance, we would be familiar with Shamatha or Shiné meditation, we could train ourselves in the various different ways in which this practice is being performed. We could practice Shiné meditation while focusing upon our breath at the tip of our nose as we inhale and exhale, and make that the sole focus of our concentration during our Shamatha or Shiné meditation. We could also employ the other methods in the course of which we would imagine the shape of a Buddha, and we would fully focus and concentrate ourselves upon this Buddha shape as our focus of concentration. Or we could simply practice without any reference point whatsoever, simply allowing our mind stream to rest naturally. So whichever of these methods one prefers, whichever of these methods one is most familiar with, these could be trained. In at this point. These three types of practice, as have been mentioned, are mainly the practice which is known as Shamatha or Shiné meditation. We could also train ourselves in Lakthong, the Vipashyana practice, clearly seeing things as they are. And as it is said in one of the verses of Tenga Sangho's famous prayer, the short supplication to Vajradhara, commonly known as the Changchoma, undistractedness is the basis of meditation. Whatever arises is freshly perceived or freshly seen, clearly seen, etc. So when we train ourselves in this way, then eventually mental activity will start again, will begin again, will make itself felt. At this particular point, you ought to simply look at what it is that happens within that mind stream of yours. Simply look at that which appears and simply leave it at that without any further ado. Practicing in this way simply means to be undistractedly aware of whatever it is that's happening within your mind stream at any given moment. As it says, undistractedness is the main part of practice. Whatever arises, whatever is perceived is the fresh, freshly tasted, fresh food, I can say for that matter, for the one who is trained, for the great meditators who are trained in resting in such a way. Which simply means to say that if you practice in this way, if you rest in this way, simply aware of whatever it is, then you simply take note of whatever happens in your mind stream. Eventually, a thought will stir in, and if it is a virtuous thought, you will simply take note of this thought and just leave it like that. Don't do anything else about it. Here's a virtuous thought, all nice and well, nothing else is to be done about it. And sometimes also non-virtuous, negative thoughts might appear, but they're not to be treated in any other way. They're also simply perceived for what they are when they appear, and simply left to themselves. That's all that is to be done. Training oneself in this kind of awareness, undistracted awareness, one does also eventually improve one's own Mahamudra practice, one's understanding, one's realization of Mahamudra. Simply practicing in this way, you would be well advised to occasionally give rise to devotion to the Lama, to pray from the very bottom of the heart to the Lama for his blessing and inspiration. And it would also be helpful to occasionally remind ourselves of the necessity of giving rise to compassion, kindness towards beings. If we were to proceed in this way, then indeed our own Mahamudra practice, our understanding of Mahamudra, etc., would be greatly enhanced. Now, Kamachakna does not only advise us to meditate on emptiness, but also to give rise or to cultivate compassion, to meditate upon compassion. That is, for the most part, done by way of training oneself in the mind training, as it is called, commonly known by the Tibetan term of lojong. This kind of practice, the practice of lojong, of mind training, is the predominant method for giving rise to the enlightened attitude, which is known as bodhicitta. When it comes to these instructions on the practice of mind training, lojong as they are known, these instructions go back to the great Indian master, Tisha, who came to Tibet in order to spread the Dharma, to solidify the spreading of the Dharma there, and the very essence of his teachings included, for the most part, all of these instructions on how to give rise to bodhicitta, how to give rise to loving kindness and compassion towards being. Then later on, within his transmission lineage, which came to be known as the Kadamba tradition, there was a great master known as Takawa Yeshe. He summarized the various streams of teachings that had originated with Atisha, and he came up, or he composed the instruction manual, practice manual that is known as the 7 points of mind training, concise instruction on how to give rise to the enlightened attitude in 7 brief chapters.
then number like showing room, mobile door, Kashi, Kashi, number showing Sabai. And the guy and I am, should something from you, sending me, then I don't want to send you some case guru.
It is said time and again very clearly that the very essence of all the teachings of the Buddha, of all the great many instructions that he has given, is the giving rise to bodhicitta, the awakened heart, as one could also call it, which is nothing else but giving rise to loving kindness and compassion towards beings. This is the very crux of whatever the Buddha has taught. Now, many among us might have been training and studying Dharma for many years. There might also be others who have just started out upon the path of the Buddha. Let it be said quite clearly that whether you're an old hand at that, or whether you're a beginner in this discipline, for all of us, the teaching on the giving rise to bodhicitta, loving kindness and compassion, is of the greatest importance. That is the very essence in which we need to train ourselves. Because this giving rise to bodhicitta, the awakened heart, this enlightened attitude which allows us to strive for the benefit and welfare for all beings, is going to be the very source of our achieving of Buddhahood, the awakening, full enlightenment of Buddhahood in the future. It is the very essence, therefore it is of such great importance. Now, the very object of that kindness and compassion of ours, which could be summarized as bodhicitta, are none other but all sentient beings. And when we direct our bodhicitta towards these beings, we should not make any difference between them. It is not the case that we should take those into our compassion or into our bodhicitta who appear influential, well-off, rich and beautiful, so to speak, whereas we should disregard the destitute and downtrodden. There is no difference between beings in that regard. No difference is being made whatsoever. And all of these beings, no matter how they might appear to us, no matter what their circumstances might be, are equally to be taken into our consideration, into our kindness and into our compassion. Without any regard for the status or the circumstances of any being, for that matter, we should simply train ourselves in being helpful and being useful and being supportive of whoever or whatever kind of being comes along. Whenever we're able to truly do so, we should simply please continue to do so. And whenever we find ourselves unable to do anything in particular, we should at least train ourselves in making prayers and aspirations for all of these beings, so that maybe in the future we might be enabled to be of true and efficient, lasting help for them.
Tela Tenga, Canado, Tela Tesi, Robanda was sick, Sombunda was very good. Sending never young, Tela, Nankonga, Robanda was in Sibu, sending come go into Tane, Robert is 70, Naramson, Nambarget, Hugh, Ingunda.
Of course, it goes without saying that there will always be lots of beings who are in need of help. When coming across these beings, people for that matter, we should help them in such a way that our helping them makes sense, that it alleviates their immediate suffering. For instance, if we came upon beings who suffer from hunger and thirst, of course we should provide them with food and drink. If we come across someone who suffers from intense cold because he or she lacks clothing, we should of course help them by way of giving them warm clothing. We might come across others who are old and infirm, and we might help them in whichever way is appropriate to ease their suffering, to ease their difficulties. Or we might come across sick people, and of course it goes without saying that we should help them by way of helping them to go to the doctors, or bringing them to a hospital, or providing them with whatever medical care or attention we are capable of, or at least put them into a position to receive such medical care. So in each and every circumstance, when we train ourselves in our actual giving of help to others, we should do so in the appropriate way.
And then,
particularly when taking the teachings of Chakava Yeshe Dorje into consideration, his teachings on mind training in 7 chapters, then in his first chapter we find instructions on how we should first contemplate the essential truth of that which we commonly call life, which is none other but the precious human body that we have achieved, which is so difficult to achieve, which is so difficult to get hold of, which is endowed with the freedoms and riches, yet which is so extremely perishable. So death and impermanence will eventually come along and snatch that body away from us, which is nothing else but the cause of an effect of the causes that we ourselves have brought about in former times. And then, of course, being reborn again within this cycle of suffering, all types of rebirth within this cycle are in the end highly dissatisfactory. So these 4 essential truths of life as it is are to be contemplated. That is Chakava Yeshe Dorje's advice in his first chapter. Already the second chapter of Chakava Yeshe Dorje's 7 points of mind training initiates the actual beginning of giving rise to the awakened heart, the enlightened attitude of bodhicitta, by way of teaching us how to think, or how to familiarize or re-familiarize ourselves with the thought that essentially all beings, not a single one excluded, have been our loving, kind parents, and we have had such loving and a close relationship with all of these beings invariably in one lifetime or other. So very clearly we are connected with all of these beings in certain ways, and they are exactly those towards whom we then are supposed to display or practice our loving kindness and compassion, our bodhicitta. Having thus established the base of those for whom this bodhicitta is to be practiced, which is none other but all beings, we would then proceed with the practice that is known as giving, taking, commonly known by the Tibetan name of Tonglen. And during this practice, in the course of this practice, we would imagine ourselves to be in the presence of all beings of the 6 types. We would imagine the hell beings to be there as well as hungry ghosts, animals as well as humans, demigods as well as gods. All of these beings would be present in front of you or surrounding you. And you would then, as you would sit in your meditation practice, imagine how with your inhalation, you would take all the negativity, all the pain, all the suffering and the causes thereof upon you in the form of dark, black light or matter, however you wish to imagine it. You would inhale all of this darkness, which signifies all the negativity and pain, etc. and so forth, and dissolve it into yourself, coupled with the wish that all of these beings who suffer from all of these various negativities become completely, utterly free of them. As you then would exhale, you would imagine your exhalation to consist of lightness, of white light, and this white light or this brightness that you exhale would be all of your positive merits, all of your happiness, etc., and so forth, all of your fortune and the causes thereof. And you would imagine this to dissolve into all of these beings so that they can happily partake of this. As you would then alternate between inhaling and exhaling, of course, you would constantly alternate this imagination of taking their negativity upon yourself in the form of darkness, as well as giving all of your happiness and merits in the form of brightness away to them. That would be the main practice which is to be employed. In his teachings on mind training, Chakra also speaks at a certain point of the 3 objects, the 3 poisons, and the 3 roots of virtue. He refers mainly here to our experience of the 3 main emotional defilements of anger, desire, and ignorance or stupidity for that matter. And we're being advised at this point to take these upon ourselves whenever the occasion occurs. For instance, if we find ourselves experiencing the influence of anger, we could use this opportunity, instead of allowing ourselves to be overwhelmed by this anger, to rather think or wish that the sources of anger and the anger of all beings may come to fruition within ourselves, so that all of these beings be free from anger and the causes thereof. In this way, we could employ the experience of anger in a virtuous way, by way of wishing that all beings become free of it, and ourselves experiencing this anger at any particular moment anyway, could strive to take it upon ourselves in such a way as to make it a useful experience. Chakra Yeshidojo also says somewhere else in these instructions on the 7 parts of mind training, combine all sorts of activities with words. In this particular case here, he means aspirations or prayers. So in all sorts of situations or all sorts of circumstances in which we might find ourselves, we should constantly train ourselves in making wishing prayers, making aspirations for the sacred beings, such as may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, may all beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. So such type of aspiration for the sacred beings is to be trained in. So having in the first step, or according to the first chapter of the 7 points of mind training, familiarized ourselves with the 4 fundamental truths of life as it is, we have then continued in the 2nd chapter to familiarize ourselves with the methods that actually give rise to the enlightened attitude of bodhicitta, to the giving rise to loving kindness and compassion for beings. The 3rd step, which is then being described in the next chapter, describes how we bring all of the various negative circumstances, obstacles, hindrances, etc., onto the path, how we make them into a useful means to proceed upon our path. In that regard, Chakra Yeshe Dorje says, the outer world being full of beings and circumstances which can cause hindrances, these are to be transformed into the path towards enlightenment or towards awakening. In that regard, it is clear that there are all sorts of hindrances and obstacles that we could possibly experience. If we just look at the outer world, we find the various influences of the elements. There could be all sorts of elemental disturbances such as earthquakes or storms or floods or fires, etc. and so forth. But on top of this, also beings themselves are constantly busy with causing themselves all sorts of trouble, all sorts of disturbance and obstacles and hindrances. So these are to be transformed as we experience them into useful means that can be integrated into our path that actually leads to enlightenment, to the awakening of Buddhahood. How to actually employ all of these various obstacles as means on the path, which as we'll explain in the next session in the afternoon. Let us now train ourselves a little bit in peaceful resting or Shamatha meditation. Time for very few questions.